Fade in on grainy black and white footage of colonial Africa, the camera lingering on a mother's tear-streaked face as distant thunder rolls. In the heart of the Congo's blood-red earth, where the whispers of ancient spirits clashed with the cold steel of empire, thousands of children were ripped from their mothers' arms, not by warlords or famine, but by priests and bureaucrats wielding the cross as a weapon. Their crime? Being born of forbidden love and divine retribution. What if the sins of the fathers echoed eternally, demanding a reckoning that heaven itself couldn't ignore? In the shadowed vaults of Brussels, where the air hangs heavy with the musty scent of forgotten decrees and yellowed parchments, lie the ghosts of an empire's darkest secret. These are not mere documents, they are the skeletal remains of lives shattered, souls adrift in a purgatory crafted by human hands. Between 1908 and 1960, as Belgium's colonial grip tightened around the Belgian Congo like a noose of iron and greed, an estimated 15,000 to 20,000 children of mixed heritage, born from unions between European men and African women, were systematically severed from their roots. They were labeled les enfants du péché, the children of sin, their very existence a blemish on the pristine facade of colonial purity. But this was no chaotic plunder, it was a meticulously orchestrated symphony of theft, conducted with the precision of a ledger book and the sanctity of a cathedral altar. Imagine the scene, dim-lit archives in a basement beneath the royal palace, where dust motes dance and slivers of light piercing through barred windows. Rows upon rows of filing cabinets, their metal frames cold to the touch, guarding secrets sealed until 2017. Each file a tombstone, inscribed with names, dates, and dispassionate notations, child removed for moral upliftment. Mother compensated, 50 francs. These were not whispers in the night, they were edicts stamped with official seals, penned in elegant French script that masked the barbarity beneath. The Belgian government, in its hubris, believed it could erase bloodlines as easily as balancing a budget. But blood, like the Congo River's relentless flow, remembers. It seeps into the earth, nourishing roots that twist toward vengeance, whispering of divine justice deferred but never denied. This tale is not one of isolated atrocities but a testament to institutionalized evil, where the machinery of empire ground human bonds into dust. It echoes the biblical plagues upon Pharaoh's house, where the firstborn were claimed not by an angel of death, but by clerks in starched collars. The mothers, those resilient pillars of African spirit, were told, c'est pour leur bien, it is for their own good. But whose good? The colonizers, who feared the dilution of their godly ordained superiority? Or the children's, thrust into a limbo where they belonged to neither soil nor sky? As we delve into the story of Marie-Therese, a woman whose womb became a battlefield and whose heart a crucible of eternal grief, we uncover layers of moral decay that challenge the soul. This is a narrative steeped in the symbolism of sin and redemption, the forbidden fruit of colonial desire, the mark of Cain upon the fathers who sired and abandoned, and the lingering curse that haunts generations, begging the question, can earthly empires escape heavenly judgment? Before we descend into the copper-veined depths of Katanga province, where the earth itself bled minerals for Belgium's coffers, pause and reflect. If this chronicle stirs your spirit, subscribe now, let the bell toll as a reminder that history's shadows demand light. Share your location in the comments, let this echo across continents, for silence is the ally of forgotten sins. What unfolds is not mere history but a spiritual autopsy, dissecting how mortal men played God, only to awaken forces beyond their control. The horror's chill lies in its banality, the way evil cloaked itself in paperwork and piety. Unlike the raw savagery of King Leopold II's earlier reign, where limbs were severed for rubber quotas, this was a refined cruelty, polished by committees in Brussels salons. Decrees were debated over cognac, policies approved with nods of enlightened benevolence. We must civilize them, they murmured, invoking the white man's burden as a veil for plunder. Yet beneath this veneer lurked a profound spiritual malaise, a rejection of the divine image in all humanity, a blasphemy against the Creator who formed man from dust of every hue. The program's architects saw mixed-race children as abominations, hybrids defying the natural order they imposed. But in truth, these children embodied the ultimate irony, living proof that love, even coerced, transcended barriers, much like the parable of the Good Samaritan, where mercy bridged divides. This systemic abduction was no aberration, it was the empire's immune response to its own infections. Colonial order rested on pillars of racial segregation, economic exploitation, and cultural erasure. To allow métis children, those of European fathers and African mothers, to remain with their kin risked blurring lines, fostering claims to inheritance, education, even citizenship. Better to uproot them, replant in mission soil, and prune away African essence. The Catholic Church, complicit in this spiritual kidnapping, positioned itself as savior. Priests preached salvation while enforcing separation, their cassocks symbols of a faith twisted into chains. It's a haunting parallel to the biblical story of Solomon's judgment, where a true mother's love yields to spare her child, yet here, no wise king intervened, only cold arbiters who claimed divine right. Now, transport yourself to Elizabethville, 1923, the beating heart of Katanga, renamed Lubumbashi in freer times, but then a monument to colonial delusion. Picture the city awakening at dawn, the sun cresting over savanna horizons, casting long shadows across boulevards wide as European avenues. Jacaranda trees, transplanted exiles from distant lands, burst into violet blooms, their petals carpeting the ground like royal shrouds over red clay soil stained by mine runoff. The air hums with the distant clang of machinery, hammers on or whistles summoning laborers to shafts that descend into Earth's infernal bowels. Copper, cobalt, uranium, these were the gods of the Union Miniere du Haut-Katanga, a conglomerate that mined not just metal but men's souls, extracting wealth while discarding humanity. The city's architecture screams arrogance, grand administrative edifices with neoclassical facades, marble columns gleaming white against the tropical blaze, interiors cooled by fans stirring humid air scented with imported lavender. Verandas overlook manicured lawns where Belgian expatriates sip gin tonics, their laughter a brittle shield against the encroaching wilderness. Electric lights flicker in European quarters, a novelty that mocks the oil lamps in native huts. Yet this splendor is built on fractures, the ground trembles faintly from underground blasts, a reminder that the earth resents its violation. Division cleaves the city like a biblical sword, the elevated European enclave, where breezes carry hints of eucalyptus and privilege, boasts tennis courts echoing with the thwack of balls, social clubs alive with waltzes under crystal chandeliers, and gardens blooming with roses defiant of the heat. Children in starched uniforms play under nannies' watchful eyes, their world a bubble of imported innocence. Below, in the site indigene, reality bites, unpaved paths churn to mud in rains, thatched roofs sag under relentless sun, markets buzz with haggling over manioc and fish, the air thick with wood smoke, sweat, and the acrid tang of open sewers. Here, life pulses raw, laughter amid hardship, songs weaving ancestral tales, but always under the shadow of curfews and passes that bind movement like invisible fetters. Governing this duality is a hierarchy etched in stone. At the pinnacle, Belgian administrators, fresh-faced idealists or jaded opportunists on short tours, wielding power with fountain pens and decrees. They dream of civilizing missions, penning reports that romanticize their role as bearers of light. Beneath them, agents territorios enforce the grit, whips cracking to meet quotas, taxes extracted like blood tithes, order maintained through fear's subtle alchemy. And navigating the chasm, the Evolus, mission-educated Africans in Western attire, fluent in French yet forever outsiders. They embody the serpent's temptation, knowledge granted, paradise denied. Into this crucible steps Marie-Therese Kawena, a Luba woman of 19, her lineage tracing to chiefs who once commanded respect before colonial maps redrew destinies. Sent to a Catholic mission school by her father, hoping education would armor her against fate, she learned scripture alongside sewing, French verbs with catechism. The nuns, stern in habits starched as their convictions, preached humility and obedience, planting seeds of aspiration that bloomed into thorns. You are God's child, they intoned, yet their lessons reinforced inferiority, preparing girls for service in white homes. Marie-Therese enters the household of Albert Deschamps, a mining engineer from Liège, as a domestic servant, a ghost in flesh, dusting crystal, polishing silver that reflects her distorted image. The home is a colonial shrine, high ceilings trapping echoes, furniture heavy with European weight, walls adorned with maps charting conquests. Albert, mid-30s, carries the paunch of prosperity and the swagger of untouchability. His features, sharp nose, receding hair, are unremarkable, but his gaze appraises like a prospector eyeing ore. He arrived in 1920 with wife Marguerite and 2 offspring, ambitions gleaming like the copper he extracts. Interactions with Marie-Therese are curt, clean this, serve that, his voice a bark masking deeper appetites. Marguerite, angular and austere, rules with an iron scepter disguised as propriety. Her days unfold in rituals, tea with other wives, gossip veiled in piety, vigilance against any breach of racial sanctity. She critiques servants with surgical precision, her dissatisfaction a shield against isolation's gnaw. In this pressure cooker, invisibility is marie-therese armor, eyes averted, steps silent on tiled floors cool against bare feet. Yet resentment festers, a quiet fire fueled by broken promises, education as liberation, reduced to servitude's chains. Colonial intimacy brews in shadows. African women, deemed exotic yet expendable, navigate a minefield where bodies become battlegrounds. Marie-Therese's presence, graceful curves, skin like polished ebony, draws unspoken scrutiny. The household's rhythm pulses with tension, mornings of scrubbing, afternoons of ironing linen scented with starch, evenings serving dinners where laughter excludes her. Beneath it all, a spiritual undercurrent, she whispers prayers to ancestors, blending Luba spirits with Christian saints, seeking protection in a world where God seems distant. By March 1924, the inevitable unfolds: pregnancy, a seed sown in coercion soil. Morning nausea grips her in the servants' quarters, a cramped alcove with a cot sagging under mosquito netting, walls echoing distant mine rumbles. She conceals it with loose cloth, but Marguerite's hawk eyes pierce the veil. Fury ignites not at Albert, whose indiscretions are winked at in expatriate circles, but at Marie-Therese, cast as seductress in this Edenic fall. Temptress, Marguerite hisses in private, her voice a venomous prayer, preserving the myth of European virtue. The child embodies the empire's nightmare, métis, a bridge too fragile for the weight of prejudice. Colonial laws, like divine commandments twisted, decree removal to preserve order. Inheritance tangled, paternity whispered, these children threaten the racial Eden. The solution? Bureaucratic exorcism, snatch them to missions, reforging European mold, absolve fathers, compensate mothers with crumbs. It's a modern Babel, where tongues of policy confuse and divide. November 3, 1924, Marie-Therese labors in the native hospital, a stark edifice of whitewashed walls and metal beds, air pungent with carbolic acid and birthing cries. Under a Flemish nurse's weary gaze, she pushes forth a daughter, Celeste, named for a kind teacher, a beacon in darkness. The infant's skin, a soft caramel blend, eyes wide with wonder, tiny fists clutching as if sensing impending loss. For 3 months, secrecy shrouds them, nights in the quarters, Marie-Therese nursing by moonlight filtering through slats, singing Luba lullabies, melodies of rivers and stars, infusing Celeste with heritage's essence. Her heart races with dread, each coup a prayer, each breath a defiance against the void. But shadows converge. Informants murmur, glances betray. On a February Tuesday, 1925, under jacaranda's purple rain, petals swirling like lost souls, the reapers arrive. Heat shimmers, air metallic with mine dust. 3 figures, Father Gustav Leclerc, skeletal in cassock, eyes judging like St. Peter's at the gates, Peter Vandenberg, agent territorial, uniform crisp as his resolve, and a Congolese policeman, young face masked in neutrality, a pawn in this tragic chess. Papers unfurl like scrolls of doom. Father Leclerc intones Decree 1523, state custody for métis if mother's incapable. Words cascade, euphemisms veiling theft, crafted in distant chambers by men blind to Africa's pulse. Marie-Therese grasps fragments, her French faltering, but the outstretched hand speaks volumes. Vandenberg's gesture, impersonal, efficient, a collector of debts. Panic surges. She flees, bare feet pounding earth, Celeste bundled close, heart a thunderous drum. Through quarters, past kitchen where cook a dish freezes, ladle midstir, eyes mirroring horror. Into alley, laundry billows like specters, chickens scatter in feathered chaos. 50 meters breath ragged, muscles burning, before the policeman halts her. His grip firm yet kind, Swahili whisper, don't fight, they'll win. Save yourself. Resignation mirrors her soul's fracture. The wrenching, Celeste pried away, Marie-Therese cry a primal wail, echoing biblical laments, Rachel weeping for her children. It rends the air, a soul shattering, haunting Odysseus nights like a curse. Father Leclerc cradles awkwardly, Vandenberg proffers receipt, 1 métis female, transferred for Christian nurture. Pen offered, signature demanded, a mark of Judas, sealing betrayal. In that moment, divine threads weave, guilt's weight on fathers, sin's stain on empire, redemption's distant call. Celeste vanishes into mission mists, Marie-Therese left hollow, a vessel cracked. But spirits stir, the ancestors whisper in winds, promising justice's slow burn. This is but the genesis, the reckoning awaits in shadows deeper still. Yet the story's spiritual core pulses stronger. Consider the symbolism: the child as innocent lamb, sacrificed on altars of pride. The mothers, like Mary at the cross, witnessing loss with pierced hearts. The colonizers, pharaohs hardened, inviting plagues of conscience. Psychological scars etched deep, guilt's phantom limb, where absent children haunt dreams, demanding atonement. Historically, this mirrors stolen generations worldwide: Australia's Aboriginals, Canada's Indigenous, patterns of empire's hubris, defying God's equity. Expand the canvas: Katanga's mines, veins of wealth pulsing like arteries, workers descending into abyssal dark, lanterns flickering like souls in Sheol. Explosions rumble, earth groaning under violation, symbolic of soul's plunder. European soirees contrast: crystal clinking, dresses swirling, oblivious to the human cost sustaining their gleam. Marie-Therese inner world, nights post-theft, curled on cot, fingers tracing absent warmth, prayers. Blending Christian pleas with Luba invocations. Why, Lord? Why allow this? Echoes Job's lament, testing faith's forge. Visions haunt, Celeste groan, eyes accusing, or redeemed, a bridge healing divides. Bureaucracies chill, files in Brussels, clerks filing with detached precision, each stamp a nail in innocence's coffin. 2017 unsealing, light piercing dark, survivors' voices rising like Lazarus, demanding truth's resurrection. Emotional immersion, feel the dread, heart pounding with Marie-Therese flight, grief's wave crashing at separation. Curiosity builds: what of Celeste? Redemption's thread? Suspense tightens, pacing rhythmic, short breaths for tension, pauses for reflection. This part closes on cliff's edge, Marie-Therese resolve hardening, a seat of resistance. But empire's machine grinds on, more children claimed, sins compounding. The spiritual chill, divine retribution looms, like Sodom's fall, for nations built on injustice. In the aftermath of that fateful Tuesday, as the dust settled like a shroud over the Deschamps backyard, Marie-Therese Coena knelt amid the scattered Franks, her world fracturing into irreparable shards. The bills fluttered in the hot breeze, their edges curling like withered leaves, each one a mocking token of the empire's arithmetic, valuing a child's soul at the price of mere wages. Vandenberg's fingers, calloused from years of signing away lives, had pressed the money into her palm with a mechanical finality, his eyes averted from the raw agony before him. He marked her refusal with an indifferent X, reducing her motherhood to an administrative footnote, her consent as irrelevant as the wind-scattered petals underfoot. The black Ford truck rumbled away, its tires grinding red earth into submission, carrying Celeste into an abyss of enforced forgetting. Marguerite Deschamps, emerging from the shadowed veranda with her lace-trimmed dress whispering against the tiles, paused only briefly. Her gaze swept over Marie-Therese's crumpled form, registering the scene not with horror but with the detached efficiency of one accustomed to such spectacles. Without a word, she retreated indoors, her heels clicking a rhythm of normalcy, summoning the bell for tea as if the air still hummed with birdsong rather than despair. To her, this was routine, a minor ripple in the colonial tapestry, unworthy of disruption. The household staff, frozen in doorways and behind shutters, would whisper of this indifference for years, a chilling emblem of how empire anesthetized hearts, turning human tragedy into banal procedure. Yet in that moment of desolation, a deeper spiritual undercurrent stirred. The francs, untouched and scattered, evoked Judas's 30 pieces of silver, betrayal's currency, paid for innocence sold. Marie-Therese's wail, raw and unearthly, rose like a lament from the Psalms, a cry echoing the biblical Rachel's grief for her lost children, refusing consolation because they were no more. This was not mere policy, it was a profane sacrament, where bureaucrats played high priests, offering up the vulnerable on altars of racial purity. The Belgian Congo's machinery of separation operated with infernal precision, calculating human worth in ledgers that mirrored the divine books of judgment, yet perverted them into tools of erasure. Divine retribution, though silent in that dusty yard, loomed as an unspoken promise: the sins of the fathers, visited upon generations, a karmic debt accumulating in heaven's vaults. 15 kilometers distant, under the unrelenting Katanga sun that baked the earth into cracked clay, stood the Mission de Saint Joseph, a fortress of whitewashed walls rising like a mirage from the savannah's golden haze. The rutted dirt road leading to it twisted through thorn bushes and termite mounds, turning to viscous mud in the rainy season, a natural barrier that isolated the compound like a mote of divine trial. Established in 1922 with funds from Brussels coffers and pious donations from Belgian Catholics envisioning a crusade against darkest Africa, the mission was no haven of mercy but a calculated enclave for the métis. By 1925, its dormitories echoed with the cries of 43 children, their skin tones a gradient of forbidden unions, each one a living indictment of colonial hypocrisy. Decree 1523 hung over them like a sword of Damocles, authorizing their removal as necessary for moral and social upliftment, a euphemism veiling the theft of heritage. Upon arrival, Celeste, tiny, swaddled in a coarse blanket that scratched her tender skin, was rechristened Celeste Deschamps, her father's surname grafted onto her like a brand of ownership, regardless of his denial. Her records, penned in meticulous ink on yellowing forms, falsified her origins, born at the mission, mother unknown, as if she had emerged fully formed from the ether, untainted by African blood. This was erasure incarnate, a bureaucratic exorcism stripping away lineage, much like the biblical blotting out of names from the book of life for the unrepentant. Father Gustav Leclerc, the mission's gaunt overseer, enforced this regime with monastic rigor. His eyes, sharp as thorns, saw African heritage as original sin, redeemable only through scourging discipline. French alone crossed lips, local tongues like Luba or Swahili earned penance, kneeling on corn kernels in the chapel, where candle flames danced shadows on crucifixes, the pain a metaphor for purging savage roots. Meals were European rituals, forks clinking on tin plates, shoes pinching feet in the sweltering heat, lessons drilling Belgian kings and catechisms into young minds. Your mothers loved you enough to let you go, the nuns intoned, their voices soft as veils but sharp as daggers, weaving a narrative of voluntary sacrifice that severed bonds like a spiritual guillotine. The older children clung to spectral memories, whispers in bunk beds under mosquito nets, or moonlight filtered through barred windows, casting ethereal glows. A lullaby's melody, the scent of wood smoke from village fires, the warmth of a mother's embrace, these fragments evoked guilt, taught as betrayal of their salvation. For infants like Celeste, the mission forged identity in isolation, priests as patriarchs, nuns as stern matriarchs, Belgium a mythical Zion promising belonging. Yet beneath this facade lurked psychological torment, a void where roots should anchor, leaving souls adrift, vulnerable to the winds of doubt. Spiritually, it mirrored the parable of the sower, seeds cast on rocky ground, withering without nourishment, symbolizing how empire's false gospel choked true divine connection. Marie-Therese's pilgrimage began at dawn, her feet blistering on the sun-baked path, the air thick with the buzz of insects and the distant roar of mine trucks. 15 kilometers of thorn-laced trails, her heart pounding with a mix of hope and dread, arriving as shadows stretched long under the noonday blaze. The mission's walls, embedded with jagged glass that glinted like judgmental eyes, repelled her at the gate. Sister Margarita, her habit starched and severe, her face etched with perpetual disapproval, delivered the verdict: no visits. It confuses them, she cooed, her tone laced with condescension, as if Marie-Therese were a wayward child herself. Better for all, cleaner. The words landed like lashes, invoking the spiritual irony of a church preaching family unity while enforcing division, a hypocrisy that cried out for prophetic rebuke. Undeterred, Marie-Therese returned weekly, her resolve hardening like clay in the sun. Each refusal chipped at her spirit, yet fueled a deeper faith, a blend of Christian pleas and ancestral invocations, whispered under acacia trees. On the fourth attempt, Father Leclerc emerged, his cassock billowing like a storm cloud, voice thunderous: harassment. Laws. Imprisonment. The threat hung heavy, a reminder of power's asymmetry, yet she pivoted to stealth. Circling the perimeter, her fingers tracing rough stone, she discovered a vantage, a termite mound granting precarious elevation, peering over glass shards into the courtyard. Sundays became vigils, children in uniform white dresses scampering under nuns' watchful gazes, their laughter a bittersweet symphony. She scanned faces, heartsick, Celeste's features blurring in memory's fog. Was it the girl with dimpled cheeks? The one chasing butterflies? Uncertainty gnawed, a spiritual torment akin to the dark night of the soul, where God seems absent, testing faith's endurance. She was not alone. Other mothers converged: Josephine, haunted by Patrice's infectious grin; Amina, hollowed by her twin's absence, her eyes pools of unspoken sorrow; Beatrice, jobless and adrift after her Sylvie's theft. They balanced on that mound, a sisterhood of the bereaved, their whispers weaving a tapestry of shared loss. Faces weathered by sun and grief, they gazed through the barrier-like souls at purgatory's edge, yearning for glimpses of paradise stolen. This communion evoked biblical widows at the temple, offering mites of devotion, their vigil a quiet rebellion against empire's edicts. From Brussels' polished halls, officials lauded the program as enlightened mercy, reports glowing with metrics of saved children, averting a mixed underclass. Mothers relieved of burdens, progeny elevated to European ideals. It was progress's facade, masking a machine of expansion. By 1930, St. Joseph swelled to over 100. By 1935, sister missions dotted Katanga, each a bastion of enforced assimilation. Registration at birth became mandatory, agents incentivized with unspoken quotas, their careers hinging on diligence in detection. Marie-Therese, once hopeful in mission school's promises, learned empire's true doctrine: love subordinated to policy, motherhood a revocable privilege. The 200 francs, preserved in a cloth pouch beneath floorboards, softened with time but sharpened her resolve, a relic of injustice, like the nails of the cross, reminding of sacrifice's cost. If this chronicle pierces your core, share it wide, let friends confront these shadows. Like to amplify forgotten voices, subscribe for more unveilings. The saga deepens. By 1936, fissures cracked the mission's ironclad facade. Father Leclerc's departure ushered in Antoine Dubois, a Louvain-trained theologian whose dissertation on colonial ethics had ruffled feathers in Brussels. Arriving with a trunk of books and a conscience stirred by progressive winds, Dubois viewed the métis not as contaminants but as innocents caught in moral quicksand. His meticulous nature turned inward, beyond official logs, names, admissions, paternal claims. He maintained a clandestine ledger, leather-bound and secreted in his desk drawer, its pages filling with the children's unvarnished truths. In candlelit evenings, amid the chapel's incense haze, he conversed with elders, fragmented tales of maternal hugs, village rhythms, fears of eternal separation. He noted nocturnal sobs, stifled questions, the psychic scars of imposed amnesia, identities fractured, like mirrors shattered by empire's hammer. Psychologically, it paralleled modern understandings of attachment trauma, souls unmoored, prone to despair's abyss. Spiritually, Dubois saw blasphemy, a church complicit in rending what God joined, echoing Christ's woe to those harming little ones, millstones awaiting. More alarming, vanishings. Children transferred to Belgium for advanced education, approved families, or vague relocations. Records sparse, inquiries stonewalled. Not your concern, administrators intoned, masking darker currents. Dubois's unease grew. Were these opportunities, or something sinister? Whispers of exploitation, adoption mills feeding Belgian demands, or worse, trails leading to oblivion. His ledger became a testament, a potential indictment, as he probed the program's underbelly, sensing divine unrest brewing. The mission's daily rhythm pulsed on: dawn prayers in dew-kissed courtyards, where mist rose like ascending souls, lessons under thatched roofs, chalk dust mingling with sweat, evenings of enforced silence, broken by covert whispers. Dubois introduced subtle mercies, allowing glimpses of African folklore in Bible stories, blending parables with local wisdom, planting seeds of reconciliation. Yet tension mounted. Older métis, sensing his empathy, confided more, their stories a mosaic of loss. One boy recalled his mother's scent of shea butter, a girl dreamed of riverside villages. These revelations haunted Dubois, fueling nocturnal prayers for guidance, his knees bruising on stone floors. Externally, Katanga evolved, mines deepened, exporting fortunes while locals toiled in darkness, symbolic of spiritual blindness. European quarters expanded, balls and banquets contrasting mission. Austerity. Marie-Therese, now in distant employ, heard rumors, transfers, expansions, her vigil internalized, a perpetual ache. The francs, talismanic, reminded of unresolved debt. Dubois's discoveries hinted at systemic rot, quotas pressuring agents, funds siphoned, children commodified. A 1934 memo, glimpsed in archives, praised efficient relocation, but redacted details chilled hints of sterilization experiments, labor placements. Historically grounded in Belgium's paternalistic policies, echoing global forced assimilations, it carried spiritually chilling undertones: empire as false idol, demanding child sacrifices, inviting apocalyptic downfall. Emotional layers deepen: empathy for mother's endurance, dreaded vanishings, curiosity at Dubois's fate. Pacing builds suspense: short, visceral sentences for climaxes, reflective pauses for spiritual depth. Cinematic, sensory immersion, sun scorch, whispers hush, ledgers creak. Original restructuring, expanded vignettes, symbolic threads. As the veil of secrecy began to lift in the dim confines of Father Antoine Dubois's office at the Mission de Saint-Joseph, a profound unease settled over him like the heavy mists that rolled in from the Katanga savannah at dawn. The air in the room was thick with the scent of aged paper and incense, the flickering candlelight casting elongated shadows across the walls adorned with crucifixes and maps of the Belgian Congo. Dubois, his brow furrowed beneath a receding hairline, pored over his clandestine ledger, its leather cover worn from countless secretive openings. The entries revealed a pattern as insidious as it was calculated. The children who vanished were invariably those with the fairest complexions, their features bearing the faintest traces of African ancestry, subtle curls in the hair, a warmth in the skin tone that could be overlooked in the right light. These were the ones deemed passable, hybrids who could be molded into the illusion of pure European stock, their origins buried beneath layers of fabricated documents and enforced amnesia. The process was shrouded in bureaucratic opacity, a labyrinth of transfers that led to Belgium, a distant, mythical land of cobblestone streets, Gothic cathedrals, and perpetual grey skies, where these children arrived as spectral figures, unmoored from their pasts. No visits from adoptive families, no letters scented with home comforts, no photographs capturing smiles against unfamiliar backdrops. They simply dissolved into the ether, their files concluding with terse notations, repatriated for integration. Dubois's suspicions gnawed at him, a spiritual torment akin to the biblical doubts of Thomas, questioning the resurrection of truth amid deception. Was this salvation or a sophisticated form of soul theft? The program's architects, in their Brussels chambers lit by gas lamps and lined with mahogany desks, viewed it as merciful engineering, sparing these children the curse of duality, absolving the empire of its indiscretions. But to Dubois, it echoed the sin of Babel, scattering identities to confound and control, defying the divine unity of creation. Undeterred, Dubois embarked on a quiet crusade, his pen scratching across parchment in the dead of night, the mission's bells tolling like omens. He dispatched letters to the Colonial ministry, their seals wax dripping under candle flame, phrased with theological precision, inquiries about destinations, family verifications, legal adoptions, welfare assurances, and most daringly, preservation of Congolese heritage. Do these children retain any thread to their mother's spirits, he queried, invoking the moral imperatives of Catholic doctrine on family sanctity. Responses trickled in sparingly, envelopes arriving via dusty couriers, their contents evasive as serpents, platitudes about opportunities unattainable in native environs, assurances of Christian upbringing. One missive, dated April 12, 1937, from Henri Jaspa, Director of Native Affairs, cut sharper, a veiled admonition wrapped in paternalistic prose. Your zeal is commendable, Father, it read, the ink's flourish betraying Brussels' arrogance, but the métis initiative advances a greater civilizational mandate. Confine your efforts to spiritual preparation, administrative wisdom resides with us. Dubois archived it meticulously, alongside medical reports and transfer logs, building a dossier that hummed with the potential for revelation, a modern Ark of the Covenant, safeguarding truths against imperial floods. This growing archive symbolized a deeper psychological fracture. The children's enforced whitening was not mere relocation but a ritual of rebirth, stripping away layers of self like onion skins under a knife. Psychologically, it inflicted wounds of identity dissociation, where mirrors reflected strangers, and dreams whispered forbidden memories. Spiritually, it blasphemed against Genesis, where God crafted humanity in diverse images, not to be homogenized by mortal decree. Dubois wrestled with his conscience in solitary prayers, kneeling on the chapel's stone floor worn smooth by generations of supplicants, the air heavy with myrrh. Lord, if this be your will, grant me sight, he murmured, his voice echoing off vaulted ceilings, seeking divine clarity amid human murk. Meanwhile, in the bustling underbelly of Elizabethville, where the red dust clung to everything like a persistent sin, Marie-Therese navigated her exile from joy. By 1926, the Deschamps household had become a mausoleum of memories, the kitchen where Celeste's cries once mingled with pot clatters, the backyard where petals fell like tears during the seizure. Unable to endure, she departed, her belongings bundled in a faded cloth, seeking solace in transient employments. Each new home brought fresh dismissals, her silence misinterpreted as insolence, her sorrow as inefficiency. European employers, sipping tea from porcelain cups imported from Antwerp, expected performative cheer, a mask over grief's raw visage. Her path wound through households of varying cruelties, arrogant officials with barking orders, indifferent wives enforcing racial divides, each stint eroding her spirit, yet forging resilience like steel in fire. By 1937, fate anchored her with Louis Vermeeren, a widowed accountant in his 60s, his face a map of sun-etched lines from 2 decades in the Congo. His modest bungalow, perched on the city's fringe where savannah met urban sprawl, smelled of ledger ink and pipe tobacco. Vermeeren, fluent in Swahili and brusque in manner, treated staff with utilitarian respect, no whips, no slurs, focusing on efficiency over emotion. He observed marie-therese rituals, Sunday departures toward the mission, returns. Under starlit skies, her features etched deeper with exhaustion. Curiosity, that subtle serpent, compelled him one June afternoon to trail her discreetly, his footsteps muffled on the dirt path lined with acacias whispering in the breeze. From a concealed vantage, he witnessed the vigil, Marie-Therese ascending the termite mound, her silhouette stark against the horizon, gazing over the wall's jagged glass into the courtyard. Children in white dresses darted like apparitions, their laughter a cruel symphony to the watchers. Other mothers joined, a silent congregation, their shared gaze a prayer unspoken. As dusk painted the sky in bruised purples, they dispersed, grief internalized like a sacred relic. Over breakfast the next morn, steam rising from coffee brewed strong and black, Vermeeren posed his query, "Which one is yours?" The words hung in the air, laden with potential peril. Marie-Therese's eyes, dark pools of wariness honed by 12 years of colonial caution, probed his intent. European benevolence often concealed barbs, conditions, exploitations. Yet in his steady gaze, she sensed authenticity. "I do not know anymore," she confessed, voice a fragile thread. "The dresses make them uniform. Perhaps the tall one with dark waves, but certainty eludes me." The admission tore fresh, a mother's eternal purgatory. Vermeeren's nod carried empathy's weight, and his offer followed, "I have a contact in the Colonial archives. If you wish, I can uncover her fate, whether she remains, or was spirited elsewhere." It was a bridge extended across chasms of distrust, a glimmer in despair's abyss. Marie-Therese, weighing risks against hope's pull, assented with a nod, her heart quickening like a drumbeat heralding change. 3 weeks elapsed, tension coiling in the household air scented with simmering stews. Vermeeren's ally, a bespectacled Flemish clerk named De Smet, indebted from financial salvations, breached protocols. In the archive's dimly lit bowels, amid shelves groaning under classified tomes, he transcribed Celeste's file, slipping the envelope to Vermeeren under guise of innocuous mail. Alone in his study, lamplight pooling on the desk, Vermeeren unfolded the papers, his stomach churning at the revelations. Celeste Deschamps, born November 3, 1924, admitted February 17, 1925, transferred August 4, 1932, aged 7, to the orphelinat St. Bridget in Bruges under the métis repatriation program. The initiative, cloaked in humanitarian rhetoric, aimed to integrate light-skinned children into Belgian society, severing African ties. Worse, a July 1932 medical evaluation dissected her humanity, cranial measurements, nasal breadth, dermal pigmentation gauged against chromatic scales, concluding minimal negroid traits, suitable for European assimilation. It was racial alchemy, transmuting blood into fiction. A forged birth certificate sealed the deception, birthplace Bruges, parents anonymous. Celeste's Congolese essence erased, whitened in official parlance, a term chilling as a grave's chill. Vermeeren, a man of figures, felt the moral arithmetic fail. This was not progress but profanation, echoing the biblical whitewashing of sepulchres, beautiful exteriors hiding decay. Confronting Marie-Therese in the kitchen, where sunlight slanted through louvered windows, he presented the documents. Her literacy faltered on jargon, but the essence pierced. Celeste in Belgium, identity fabricated, oblivious to her roots. Agony renewed, a storm within. "Can I reclaim her?" she implored, hands trembling on the pages. Vermeeren's pause was gravid with realism. "Legally, no. She exists no more as Celeste Deschamps. Reclamation would shatter the program's facade, exposing lies." Despair crested, "Then what?" His response, deliberate, bear witness. Document. Unite mothers, forge an indelible record. Truth as weapon against oblivion. Not reunion, but reckoning, a spiritual justice. Like prophets decrying idols. Thus ignited, Marie-Therese transformed vigil into mission. Sundays at the wall evolved, she gathered testimonies, voices pouring forth like rivers breaching dams. Vermeeren aided, evenings in lamplit sessions, his pen capturing raw narratives, seizures, horrors, compensations, insults, enduring voids. Notebooks swelled, over 60 by 1938, each a soul's imprint, from Elizabethville's labyrinthine quarters. Yet this fraction hinted at vastness, hundreds, thousands colony-wide, under Decree 1523's shadow, a systemic sin-blending state and church in unholy union. Word reached Du Bois via discreet channels, propriety barred direct contact, lest scandal brew. A nocturnal rendezvous at Vermeeren's, moonlight filtering through curtains, united them. Du Bois proffered his ledger, Vanishings chronicled, Marie-Therese her testimonies, griefs raw. Cross-referencing unveiled the machine, policy-driven, colony-spanning, decades deep. This is orchestrated, Du Bois intoned, anger edging despair, state-sanctioned soul harvest. Marie-Therese plea, can you halt it? His reply, shadowed, I am but one cleric. Hierarchy endorses, dissent invites exile. Yet perhaps, together. Their alliance symbolized redemption's spark, a priest's intellect, a mother's heart, an accountant's pragmatism converging against empire's Goliath. Psychologically, it offered catharsis, grief channeled into agency. Spiritually, it invoked David Stone, faith-toppling giants. Historically, it mirrored global reckonings, Australia's stolen generations, Canada's residential schools, patterns of colonial erasure, demanding atonement. Cinematic vistas expand, Du Bois's letters traversing oceans, waves crashing against ships bearing sealed fates. Marie-Therese gatherings under acacias, women's circles like ancient rituals, sharing pains amid fireflies' glow. Vermeeren's study, papers strewn, a war room against invisibility. Emotional immersion, dread in vanishing's mystery, empathy in mother's vigils, curiosity in alliance's potential. Pacing rhythmic, tense builds in revelations, pauses in reflections. Spiritual chill, divine scales tipping, sin's weight summoning judgment. In the dimly lit parlor of Louis Vermeeren's bungalow, where the air hung heavy with the scent of cooling tea and unspoken dread, Marie-Therese Cawena's words sliced through the tension like a machete through vine. Then what good are you? The accusation, raw and unfiltered, escaped her lips with a tremor of exhaustion and fury, born from 13 years of swallowed grief. She did not retract it, the question lingered, echoing off the walls adorned with mining maps and faded photographs of Belgian winters. Father Antoine Du Bois sat motionless, his cassock pooling like shadows around him, his face paling under the lamplight. What good, indeed? A priest bound by vows of obedience, ensnared in a church that sanctified separation under the guise of mercy. What power did Scripture hold against decrees stamped in Brussels' marble halls? The room fell into a profound silence, broken only by the distant hum of cicadas and the occasional rumble of a passing truck laden with copper ore, symbols of the empire's insatiable hunger. Yet in that void, Vermeeren, the pragmatic accountant whose life was ruled by columns of figures and balanced ledgers, stirred. His eyes, sharp behind wire-rimmed spectacles, gleamed with calculated resolve. We document, he said, voice steady as a ledger entry. Everything. Every seizure, every mother, every vanished child. We compile a record so irrefutable, so exhaustive, that it demands reckoning. Copies to Belgium newspapers, Catholic societies, politicians with consciences. We force the light upon them. It was audacious, perilous. Dissent in the colony invited retribution, exile, imprisonment, or quieter disappearances into the rainforest's embrace. Europeans aligning with the colonized breached the sacred racial covenant, inviting the state's iron fist. But it was armament against apathy, a paper rebellion, wielding truth as David slung stones. Spiritually, it evoked the prophet's scrolls, hidden in caves against tyrannical kings, preserving testimony for Judgment Day. Psychologically, it offered agency amid helplessness, transforming passive suffering into defiant legacy. Thus, their clandestine alliance deepened, meetings shrouded in night's velvet cloak, documents passed like contraband sacraments. Notebooks proliferated, pages filled with testimonies in Vermeeren's precise script, Marie-Therese dictated recollections vivid with sensory ghosts, the metallic tang of hospital air during birth, the warmth of Celeste's breath against her neck in those fleeting months. Each entry a resurrection of pain, a bulwark against oblivion. The work was methodical, perilous whispers in markets, covert gatherings under baobab trees where mothers shared stories amid the rustle of leaves like ancestral murmurs. The horror compounded, not rogue cruelty, but sanctified policy, echoing biblical Pharaoh's edicts against Hebrew sons, cloaked in protective intent yet drenched in bloodline erasure. As Europe's skies darkened with war's omens in March 1939, Hitler's shadows lengthening, Belgium's neutrality fraying, Vermeeren dispatched the parcel. A weighty bundle, bound in plain brown paper, entrusted to a neutral courier bound for Antwerp's docks. Inside, marie-therese testimonies, raw as open wounds, Dubois's ledger, chronicling whitened vanishings, pilfered transfers and medical calipers measuring humanity in centimeters. Addressed to Paul-Henri Spaak, not yet Prime Minister, but a journalist of repute at Le Soir, known for cautious probes into colonial shadows. The cover letter, Vermeeren's craftsmanship, framed it as moral imperative, a programmed scale, thousands severed, identities alchemized, begging public scrutiny. Spaak received it in April, his Brussels office chilled by spring rains pattering against windows. Overlooking the Grand Place Gothic spires. A veteran of colonial intrigue, he anticipated nuance, but the dossier's depth unnerved him. Clinical assessments grading skin like or samples, forged certificates birthing Europeans from African wombs. Verification followed, discreet inquiries to ministry contacts, cross-references yielding grim confirmations. He drafted the exposé, word-searing, indictment of benevolence as mask, revelation of racial engineering as statecraft. Yet before ink dried for print, visitors arrived, 2 ministry envoys, suits impeccable, demeanors velvet over steel. In hushed tones over coffee in his study, they appealed to patriotism. Publication would wound Belgium's prestige amid rising anti-colonial tides, destabilize Congo's order as war loomed. National interest, they murmured, eyes unyielding. Spaak, principled yet pragmatic, weighed career, family, nation's fragile poise. The article slumbered, filed as sensitive, postponed indefinitely, entombed for 78 years in archives' dust-choked shelves. Suppression's triumph, truth muzzled not by denial, but deferral. Retribution swift in Katanga's heat. June 1939, Dubois summoned, transferred to Equateur's impenetrable jungles, a verdant exile ministering to isolated villages, far from métis files. His ledger vanished en route, swallowed by administrative maws, its confessions silenced. Punishment veiled as routine, a clerical millstone for questioning divine colonial order. Vermeeren's renewal denied, 3 months to depart, his ledgers obsolete in a system intolerant of moral audits. In parting, he proposed the impossible, accompany him to Belgium, seek Celeste in Bruges' cobbled streets. But realities intruded, a Congolese woman with a European man? Scandals blaze, deportation's certainty. And reunion's phantom, Celeste, 14, forged in European mold, her African essence exorcised. Would recognition spark joy or horror? A mother claiming a daughter taught to abhor her blood? The prospect. Twisted like a knife, loss compounded by alienation. August 1939, Vermeeren sailed from Matate's port, waves crashing against the hull like unanswered prayers. Gifts to Marie-Therese, the master documents, months' wages, promises of Belgian inquiries. Letters followed, 1939 to 1942, his script a lifeline amid wartime blackouts, tentative leads, orphanage traces, war's disruptions. Then silence, as blitzkriegs engulfed Europe, severing threads. Marie-Therese never knew his fate, survival through occupation, post-war searches, or oblivion. Yet she persisted, notebooks expanding through the 1940s 50s, new mothers, fresh thefts, the program's inexorable march. The métis enterprise endured World War II's tempests unscathed, Nazi occupation of Belgium diverted scrutiny, Congo's resources fueling Allied efforts while separations persisted. Missions burgeoned, St. Joseph housing 200 by 1950, siblings sprouting across provinces, efficiency honed, birth registrations mandatory, agents quota-driven. Independence in 1960 severed the artery, authority dissolved, removals ceased not from epiphany but eviction. Estimated 15,000 to 20,000 lives rerouted, missions shuttered, youths released into a nascent nation grappling with identity. Many floundered, European manners clashing with African rhythms, limbo's children adrift, psychological scars manifesting in alienation, substance fails, identity crises echoing modern intergenerational trauma. Those repatriated to Belgium often remained veiled, raised as orphans, tales of abandonment woven into psyches. Revelations, sporadic, posthumous papers, DNA's modern oracle, chance resemblances sparking quests. Many perished ignorant, European facades intact, mothers' vigils unknown. Spiritually chilling, souls bifurcated, divine image fractured by human hubris, redemption deferred across oceans. Marie-Therese Colonial endured in Lubumbashi, Elizabethville reborn, laboring until 1973, claimed her at 68, body bowed by toil, spirit etched with sorrow's indelible ink. No reunion, no closure on Celeste's fate. Adoption? Family? Grandchildren carrying unknowing blood? Her room yielded treasures, notebooks swollen with decades' testimonies, Vermeeren's letters yellowed, the cloth pouch with 200 francs, relics soft as ghosts, ink faded yet accusation sharp. Her niece, inheriting amid independence's fervor to bury colonial phantoms, stored them in a trunk. French barriers, era's distance rendering them curios. 40 years entombed until 2013, a Congolese historian, delving child abductions, unearthed them. Digitization followed, voices resurrected. Converging with Du Bois's resurfaced ledger, Church Archives' guilty hoard, and Spock's dormant dossier, they fueled 2017's governmental report, regrettable practices, problematic outcomes, intentions good yet flawed, euphemisms veiling atrocity. 2019, Prime Minister Charles Michel's parliamentary apology, international headlines, human rights acclaim. Acknowledgement, violations, separations unjust, origins denied. Historic, yet hollow. Apologies mend no severed bonds, restore no lullabies, heal no primal wounds. Marie-Therese, dust by then, unheard it, Celeste, if alive, perhaps unaware, unreached. Scars transcend generations, mother's grief as ancestral curses, children's disconnection as spiritual exile. The program's banality terrifies most, no shadowy cabal, but daylight decree, ministers approving, priests implementing, agents executing with conviction of righteousness. Documented meticulously, like Holocaust's ledgers or slavery's bills of sale, evil's true face, ordinary functionaries, believing in civilizing zeal, inflicting torment via forms and signatures. It echoes Hannah Arendt's banality, horrors by bureaucrats, not demons, convinced of duty's sanctity. Dismissed maternal love as primitive, revocable by superior. Judgment, never meeting eyes as pens erased existences. This legacy haunts, reminder that institutions, church, state, can sanctify inhumanity, cloaking genocide in charity. Divine justice lingers, unspoken sins of fathers, empire's hubris inviting reckoning beyond mortal apologies. The notebooks endure, testimonies whispering, remember, lest history's wheel turns anew. If shadows stir your soul, reflect below, was justice truly served? Share, like, subscribe, bell tolling for forgotten cries. More abyssal truths await.